I think that would be I think we need a new profession, to be
True.
honest.
Yeah.
All
So
right, so yeah,
floor
go
is
ahead.
all
Sorry.
yours, Annie. So you can take a lead.
All right, thank you. So again, hey everyone, good afternoon, morning, evening, whatever time of the day it is for you on the other side of Teams. My name's Antti Pajunen, and I come from Finland, which is in northern Europe, between Russia and Sweden. And the next about 40 minutes, I will be talking about extending project operations with all of you. And if you're like, hey, I don't know project operations, this is, is this for me? I think a lot of what I'm going to talk about is while it is in context of project operations, I want to say, in my opinion, it is a bit universal in the sense that if you work on any Power Platform, well, let me put it this way: if you work on any Dynamics products, then the way you extend them with Power Platform is pretty much the same, right? It doesn't matter if it's project operations or field service or core sales or customer service. This is more about that thought of extending and what should be done by consultants and what should be done by professional developers. So first off, thanks to all the sponsors. It's always due to sponsors that events and conferences are possible these days. So huge thanks for chipping in to this event. And then I have to say that I don't really know what this slide is about, but I thought it was mysterious enough that I just kind of wanted to leave that in. But it actually has no purpose or value in my presentation at all, other than this. So I pretty much just ran through the agenda without actually showing the agenda slide. So extending Dynamics first-party apps on Power Platform is what I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to focus on project operations because that's the Dynamics app that I know the best myself, and I've been working with it since it came out as V1 PSA in 2016. I actually, ironically, do work primarily on Power Platform and low code, and not that much on Dynamics these days. But I do advise partners and customers on, what considerations they should make when they're implementing. Either as a partner or as a customer looking at implementing project operations. So we'll kind of go through just a very quick basics of what it is, because I'm not assuming knowledge for what ProjOps is, and then we're going to talk about how to extend it. And again, there is a strong Power Platform focus here. So I'm going to go through some proof of concept ideas, a couple of demos, and then I'm going to sum everything up. And I will move fairly fast because I have a hard stop in exactly 35 minutes. I have a workshop starting, so I'm going to run through this fairly fast. And I already did pretty much introduce myself. So again, pleased to meet you. Pleased to meet you all. I come from Finland, and yeah, it's a lovely full day here, but a bit cloudy and dark, about 1 p.m. So what is project operations? And I'm going to just, again, kind of run through this fairly fast because I'm not assuming knowledge, and I just kind of want to communicate my thoughts on what I think project operations is, and that'll help you understand the context of why I'm talking about its extensibility. So ProjOps is an end-to-end application primarily designed for professional services. So what that means is, if you're a consultant on the other end of Teams, or you work for a customer and you're from a project-based organization, project operations is for project-based organizations. To essentially be able to take a grasp of what are they selling, to whom are they selling, then to do a transition from sales to delivery, to deliver projects, and then to at the end invoice for those projects. So it is, you could say it is an ERP, and officially it is placed with Microsoft on the ERP ERP mapping or in an ERP SKU from a license point of view. But when we think of the sort of the CRM side of it, because it's actually built on two different platforms. It's built on what used to be Project Service Automation. It's built on Dynamics 365 Finance, and then it also has Project for the Web included in it. What it actually is kind of depends on how you want to implement it. So it can be a full-fledged ERP with Dynamics 365 Finance in it, or it can more be a what I would call a front-end application for consultants and project managers who manage projects on Dataverse. Without the robust ERP features and functionality behind it. So it can kind of be front end, back end, or those both. So it's in that sense, it's a bit of a mysterious application because it's one of those first platform play applications by Microsoft that it actually leverages the whole of actual Dynamics and Power Platform. And then Project for the Web comes in with project management. That's the tool that we use to manage projects and it's infused into that Dataverse model-driven application side of things. So one thing that I always want to kind of highlight is, what does project operations do? And like I said, it's a fit for project-centric organizations who need to fill or who need to kind of run through that project life cycle from sales, delivery to invoicing. So it does things such as prospecting, resource management, delivery execution, time expense, and invoicing. It does that fairly well, and it does naturally handle project accounting when we factor in Dynamics 365 Finance in as well. So these are some of the, I'd say, very high level core features and functionalities where it performs pretty well. But what I always like to emphasize is that not just talking about what it does well is important. It's also important to talk about what it does not do. Who is it not for? And what I always say is, it's not to serve all industries, right? It's not an ERP for everything out there. In my opinion, it is professional services in general. So if you're working with customers who are in construction or law, it doesn't have purpose-built functionality to those industries. And for example, with construction, you might run into some blockers, to be honest. So it's best at serving industries, like I'm going to say ours, like Microsoft partners who do consulting and purely run projects. And also what I want to say is, and emphasize, is that it's not a portfolio management tool. So if you're looking for something to manage your project portfolios with, this would not be that tool. There would be other tools in the Microsoft ecosystem for that, and plenty of tools outside of Microsoft ecosystem. And then, if you're also looking for a tool to specifically just manage projects, if you don't care about project financials or sort of getting money in your account through invoicing your customers, if you're just interested in managing projects, then this will probably not be the tool for you, because this focuses heavily on that project financial side. Get our money in our account so that we can keep our business running. So those are some of the things that I always say that it doesn't do well. So then we come into extensibility. So what are some of the blanks to fill in project operations? Now, if we think of partners, some of the blanks to fill in are those industry verticals. For again, law firms. If you're serving law firms, then that industry has very specific needs, and I can only guess that its needs differ throughout different geographies and regions in the world. But in general, law has very specific needs. So you need to think of your own ways of extending this product to serve law firms, even though that is professional services. Now, one thing that is very, for someone coming from dynamic CRM, from having a CRM background, customizing project operations, that's exactly like with any other CRM, dynamic CRM sales, customer service, field service project. You always have to make customizations, whether it's without using code or whether it's developing and using code. But customizations are always there. That need exists in project operations as well. I think that in reality, though, if we think of functionalities and bits and pieces of different processes that professional services organizations have, some of the most common extensibility features and extensions that I usually see are things like change requests, work time banks, mobile apps for users, different kinds of project templates, and these kinds of things. And I also have BI there, even though I don't think BI is really, I don't really consider BI business intelligence as as an extension. It's more around deriving insights for proper decisions, but I've added it here because the role of Power BI, as if you come from Dynamics, as I'm sure you know, plays a huge role in implementations and in projects. There's a lot of reporting and analytics that we need to do as implementers so that customers actually get value from Dynamics. And that role is something that is very big in project operations as well. So how do we fill those blanks? Well, the nice thing with with what the platform is today is it enables us to do a lot more than it did. I'm going to say 2000, 2015, 2016. And it specifically allows consultants to do a lot more. And again, my background is in consulting. I'm not a developer, so I don't write any code. For me, JSON is code. It's code. That's close enough to code that I can that I can read and create. But I think that today, with the tools that we have, consultants are able to take more out of what we can take more out of the platform and offer more value for customers. And that's through Power Automate, primarily through Power Automate, through Power Automate, and through Power Apps, specifically Canvas apps, and naturally because of through Power BI as well. And I think that gives opportunities for consultants to try different features and try different features, functionality, and different extensions as proofs of concepts for customers. I think that's a more convenient way and an easier way today than it was, I'm going to say, about 8 years ago. And the nice thing with that is we can create a pretty flashy and nice proof of concept to see if our idea works. And then if it does, then we can think if that idea can be implemented in low code or no code based on the proof of concept, or whether or not that needs actual development work or should be built completely by professional developers. But we can get started further. And that's sort of something that I want to talk about here. What are some of those proof of concept kind of ideas that I think would be good for functional consultants, basically? What would work and what would not work? And I'll kind of run through examples and I'll try to give some pros and cons. Naturally, they're my opinions on why something works and something doesn't work. And also, the truth is that our dev resources are scarce. I think we do have significantly less devs than we do consultants. So the more we can enable our consultants to build proofs of concepts, I think the better it is. And I think we can deliver more value to our customers. That's what we're specifically seeing in on the low code side. So why would it not work on the Dynamics side? And then those no code proof of concepts can be pretty easy to deprecate as well if we deem them just unsuccessful. So some considerations that we do have we do need to pick our proof of concepts battles, not battler, but battles. Seems there's a typo there. So pick your proof of concepts battles. And this is a bit, I think, requires architectural knowledge of the platform to some extent. And so before you start building, you kind of need to understand the use case also from a platform point of view. Do we need something like the event execution pipeline, for example? That's not something that is in a consultant's toolkit. We can't really do, as consultants, we don't write plugins. We can't really use the event execution pipeline, which is, that's a fantastic idea on the platform, and it serves so many and solves so many problems, but that's a pro code thing. So that's something when if we use Power Automate, we're going to struggle with. And then the overall time investment and complexity. An example from project operations is, if we want to use the project schedule APIs, and I'm not going to talk about the project schedule APIs in more detail right now, because that would be a session of its own, but that's represented as an example. If we want to use the project schedule APIs to create records, projects, tasks, buckets, and whatnot in project operations, that's not a simple Dataverse record or row to create. There's actually an API that we have to call for that. And while we can do that in Power Automate, it very quickly becomes significantly more complex to do there than it would in C#. So you kind of have to think of the use case, think of how technically something is achieved, whether or not it's actually faster to do it in pro code than it is in low code. And then again, what I always emphasize to customers is, if we have a feature that that Microsoft's committed to releasing in the next 6 months or 6 months or a year, do you want to build that? And is there something coming out? That's something you can always ask for project operations on the ProjOps Teams channel. And then naturally, as new features come in, and this is ProjOps is a product that develops fairly fast these days. It's taken tremendous leaps forward just in the past 2 years when it was launched and became project operations from its predecessor, which was PSA. You do want to make sure that whatever features that you build that are not in the product don't kind of clash with the logic that Microsoft is putting in. And one good example would be a lot. That's pretty much a no-brainer in professional services and business in general. Forecasting. I'm not going to go to what if scenarios, because that's a different topic. But forecasting is pretty basic. What's my business going to look like? So if you build forecasting for project operations, which I'm sure many have built, that's a feature that's rolling out in the next release wave. So, should you invest in that? And then a really, really important factor is consider the audience. So if you're building a proof of concept for a few users, but you have 1,000 users in production, will that proof of concept that you build, is that going to scale? And I actually have a very good example here, because I built something that worked perfect just for me and my own tenant. But then I realized when I was building a similar solution for a customer, I ran into some limits. And I'm going to try and remember to mention that at the end of the third demo, why that essentially, is a nice idea on paper for a few people, but it doesn't scale. So does something scale? And again, this is, consultants should know that they need to build solutions that scale. Sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes we can't test that, but that's what we have to kind of, try and think if whatever we're building, if that's something that's gonna actually scale up. And an example of project operations could be that, if you create something when a time entry is approved and we get this thing called actual in the system, when a time entry is approved, it's easy to test that for 20 or 30 time entries, but you need to think of what happens when your solution is scaled up. If you go to an enterprise customer and you get 5,000 time entries approved on a Friday evening or a Friday afternoon, what's going to happen? If you're using Power Automate, what's going to happen is it going to throttle? Is the async service going to flip out? Is it able to handle that? So these are some of those things. I'm not going to answer yes or no, by the way, because I know that it might, sometimes that'll work, sometimes that'll not work. It depends on the position of the moon and stars. So think of how your solution is going to scale. So proof of concept ideas, what and why? So I have three use cases, three extension use cases, and three proof of concept use cases in total that I'm going to run through. And these are all based on something on requirements that I have encountered while talking about project operations with partners and customers. So there's nothing really here that I've come up with. It's actual requirements from real life scenarios. I'm not saying I've implemented all of these. I've more played around and seen and looked how these could be done. Some of these I have taken further than others, but they are based on real life scenarios and real world needs. So the first thing is change requests. And you might be thinking, you're talking about a professional services tool, but it doesn't handle change requests. Well, that is unfortunately one of these things where the product is simply not there yet. It does not have everything. It'll get these things, but it's still in some sense fairly new. So change requests are something that if you want to handle change requests in project operations, you have to build your own logic for that. And what is a change request then? Well, in its simplest form, when a project scope changes and we need additional work to be done on a project, we're going to initiate a change request and get that signed by a customer. And the real world scenario here is that sometimes we actually might need a pen and paper signature. It might be pen and paper. It might be an electronic signature through DocuSign or Adobe or whatever, or those, plethora services that we have. But it might be an actual paper form that we have as a PDF that then needs to be processed somehow. It might not just be an electronic record, a row in a database in Dynamics. It might actually be a PDF document. So what we're going to do with our change requests is we're going to get that signed, that change request, and we're going to push that into a change request table, a custom table in Dataverse. And then based on that change request, we're going to append that change request to our order that is related to our project. So we have a project that we're executing, and then we have an order / a project contract with a customer that defines the scope of execution. We're going to append our change request to that and essentially make an amendment to our order. So let's see how that is done. And for the sake of simplicity, I have already created the rows in Dataverse because I'm sharing my camera. I have my camera on. I'm sharing on Teams. Not only is my laptop really slow, but also the flows that actually do the work do take a while to run. And since we're a bit pressed on time, we don't want to wait for those flows to run because 10 minutes of this presentation would be spent on just sitting around waiting for flows to complete. But in a nutshell, I'm going to start with SharePoint. And I'm not a SharePoint person. This is probably the fanciest SharePoint thing that I've ever built. But what we have here are PDF documents that are change requests. And those change requests, those documents, and let me just open one up so you can actually see what they're like. So, oh gosh. So this is one of those office things, I guess. Sometimes this opens and sometimes it doesn't. All right, here we go. So it is just a change request template that I've created that lists the project and the schedule, the impact on the schedule, and you know, yada yada yada, sum total and whatnot. So just a change request template that I've made. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to process, and this has been processed already for the sake of example. What I'm going to process this change request document, and what happens is I have a Cloudflow that takes the contents of this document, runs it through AI Builder, and through where's my AI Builder model? It's right here. So runs the document through AI Builder's was it form processing model or something like that? I never remember. I always forget the names of the exact models that AI Builder has built in, but in any case, you get the idea. AI Builder processes that form, and what it then does is, it shoots the result back to SharePoint as processed. If it's failed, then it's failed. And when the CR document is processed, what happens in Dataverse is it creates a new row in a custom table. And let's just take the latest that we have. The latest that we have here. So it creates a row in a custom table called change requests in Dataverse, and basically takes the information from the documents and models it kind of like field on a document to a column in Dataverse, and creates also those change requests lines that we saw on that document. It was that plan, how are we extending? What is the impact of the CR? What are those additional tasks that we're going to do? Those additional tasks from the document become these change request lines. So really, no brainer here in the sense that it's basically modeling that document. What is our CR, and then modeling our table and its fields based on whatever our CR process is like, but what or CR document is like. But what we're going to do next is we're going to append this change request to our order in project operations. So appending this CR to our order in project operations creates a new order line on our order. So project contracts and orders, that's synonymous. So it's the one and the same thing. Orders are in project operations is that concept that holds together our project financials and defines what is the kind of work that we're doing for the customer. Are we doing fixed price, time and material, and so on and so on. So it creates a new order line on our order. And again, there'd be tons of nuances behind this logic, kind of what needs to be taken into consideration when it comes to task-based billing and these kinds of things. Again, that would be a session of its own, so I can't go that deep into how it technically creates that and what are the prerequisites. But the point is, it creates a new order line. And through that new order line, what we'll also get is essentially a new structure in our project plan. In our project work breakdown structure in Project for the Web, we're going to get a new structure based on that change request that I made. So it originated from that document, processed through AI Builder, went to our change request table, then it was processed and appended to our order, and at the same time, it's also appended to our project. So this is one actual extension use case. Now, hopping back to the slide deck, what is this extension scenario, this proof of concept in when we kind of look at it from a real world point of view? What are some of the pros and cons about this? So the good thing is, these are we're talking about a couple of custom tables here. So those custom tables are really easy and fast to implement, and they can be deprecated easily. The thing with this is, though, that the only thing that we can really do is do an execution with an HTTP request receive trigger, which might not fly in all customer tenants and customer scenarios. So we have things like, how do we hide the ribbon button when we append the change request to an order? How do we uh, how do we inhibit or prevent people from smashing that button and actually appending it over and over again? So hiding that button, displaying whether the execution succeeds or fails. Those are some of the things that are not that easy to accomplish in low code. And then one thing that we need to be again aware of is we don't have that event execution pipeline here, so there's no pre-validation. There's no immediate pre-validation to validate whether or not that CR has already been appended to our order. And if we do smash that button and we end up creating several or we end up appending that CR to an order several times, and something happens, async doesn't roll back changes. So we would actually have to try catch in the flow and build error handling so that we don't come up with unnecessary rows in the order or in the project plan in case the flow fails kind of midstream. And again, notifications in the UI, I'm talking about notifications for success and failure. I think those make more sense with JavaScript. We do have those notifications on model-driven apps these days, but it's I think it's work in progress. Maybe we'll get there someday. And then there are, in addition to that, there are some requirements that we have to take on related entities such as time and fees, so that we don't make unfortunate accidents, and we can ensure that we have transactional consistency, that we have our project financials are coming in the right way, and for those kinds of things we would actually require JavaScript to accomplish on our time and trees. And then the final thing is, we are calling those project schedule APIs. So we have to call the project schedule service through the APIs. And if our CR only has a small number of tasks, it's fairly doable. But if we're talking about CRs that can have multiple tasks, that would be excruciating to create in Power Automate for a consultant. So then again, our devs might actually be solving that issue and that flow faster. So before I jump into the next use case, to kind of summarize, the change request idea is nice. Is a nice example to build for a customer. It takes, I don't know, you'll spend like 5 to 10 days building that for a customer, I guess. So it's something that you can fairly easily build. Is it a robust example? Could you actually run this in an enterprise customer in production? Not like this. I think you're going to need some of those pro code components in this, but you're able to create you're able to create the proof of concept. Is this what our CR process should look like? And is this what our CR process should do? Now, it remains to be argued whether or not it makes sense to just, do this in code from the beginning, instead of even doing a low code proof of concept. That's, that's something that we can definitely debate on. So the next use case is something that we actually use in production ourselves. And that is listing invoice attachments. And one of the things in project operations is it creates data in the database in Dataverse very well, but it not necessarily is not that good in creating, these reporting like constructs. So for example, when we create an invoice, we don't really have anything to show to customers, about that invoice. There's no smart PDF or smart nothing that we could show that, hey, this is our invoice. So creating invoice attachments is definitely one use case. When we submit time entries and we invoice a customer, we will show the work that we've actually done on our implementations to the customer via these invoice attachments. So not an out of the box, not an out of the box functionality. So let's kind of look at what invoice attachments could look like before we look at the conclusions. So invoice attachments in its simplicity, and this is again, this is an architectural, I could say, a discussion. How do we fire invoice attachments off? And if you work with project service automation and on project operations, you will know that a concept of a time entry and whether that's approved or not, and how that becomes financial data is not that straightforward of a concept. So we have to kind of think of, where are we going to get that data from for our invoice attachments? And I've blogged about this on my blog, day-to-day-dynamics365.com, if you want to read further about this and read more about this. But first, we need to make that decision of that decision on what are we going to use, what data are we going to use as the basis of invoice attachments. But once that decision's been done, then the next decision is, how are we going to create those invoice attachments? Are we going to create them from an invoice, or do we have some other UI that we're going to create them from? And, again, for the sake of example, what I've done is I've created a custom page, which is, as you can see, I'm not I'm not really a Canvas app builder. My artistic creation skills for beautiful visual designs is fairly limited. Ironically, I'm red and green colorblind as well, so that's why I added a green banner and a red button here. So what we would be doing here is we would be, the approach here is that as a project manager, I'm responsible for invoicing, and those invoices are probably created on a recurring schedule, but I also want to create attachments for them. So what I can do is I can just hop on a custom page and search for a project. And once I've searched for that project, I could just, choose the dates for, the from and to dates for which I want to create an attachment for. And then I'll run the attachment. And what Power Automate does is, based on the based on the selections in the UI and the custom page, it creates a Word document and a PDF document with invoice attachments. And let's see if, clicking on this, if I can get that open. I'm going to get that error from, let's try that again. I've never really, here we go. No, this is, it's always a consistent issue with, for some reason, with PDF previews. So then, no. Let's try and open it in browser. See if that works. Here we go. So the invoice attachment is nothing fancier than a Word document that we are processing in Power Automate, and then that Word document is converted into a PDF, and it lists basically any data that you want to list, any data that you want to bring into that Word document, we can list from our time entries or approvals or our actuals on the document, and then uh, just basically ship it to the customer as a PDF. So based on this use case, if we think of, again, some of the pros and cons of such such a proof of concept and of such an extension. One thing is we've got several ways to build attachments, right? The options are, I think I ended up counting like 5 or 6 different options in how this could be achieved. And while fetch-based RS reports might be feasible to some, building those fetch-based RS reports takes a bit of time. Flow is maybe an option that is, in the end, easier to change than those RS reports. But the truth is, there's an initial investment to both. Then there's that question of, RS reports. How many people are actually proficient in building fetch-based RS reports? Not everyone knows how to do it. I've actually have to say I've never built a fetch-based RS report. I've always been able to avoid that, and I've been very happy with not having to have built that. And then do we use paginated reports? That's one option as well. So what are we going to use technology-wise is a question. And then one big decision maker here is, or decision point here is, what is the source of truth for those attachments? Is it the invoice line details in project operations, or is it project approvals? And again, where do we run the report from? Custom page or from the invoice itself? And then, depending on the customer, how pretty should the attachment be? Again, Word templates versus, for example, fetch-based reports. There's only so much that we can achieve with a Word template. So, how pretty should it be? How much time do we want to invest in small positioning of fonts and whatnot? Because that's in every single project. I mean, whenever we create templates like these, we spend a lot of time just doing those fine attachments. And then technical limitations. Flow is not good for complex calculations. You can't do complex calculations in Flow. And I'm not gonna define complex calculations. That's something that I'll leave to you. But if you want to do complex calculations, then probably Fetch, not to mention C# would be better for that. So we can do basic calculations in Flow, but if we want to do something wild, then we're just going to run out of capabilities with Flow for that. Again, this is one of those things that is pretty fast to build those. So it's a few days, and you should be up and running with something like this. So it's a fairly fast concept to build. If you build it internally, you might get value out of that internally, and then you can showcase that for a customer perhaps. But it is a nice swift proof of concept that's definitely doable by a consultant. So the last one that we have, I think I have about 10 minutes. The last scenario that we have is time entry reminders. And this is probably something that I don't think there's ever been a professional services organization that I've talked to who would not have had some sort of need or some sort of existing logic for reminding their consultants of time entries at frequent intervals, whether that's daily or whether that's weekly. Daily reminders might be that might be a bit much because you're getting harassed daily for your time entries, and I'm not sure if I'm a fan of that. But weekly reminders is something that I have encountered several times, and there again isn't anything out of the box that would remind a user of their time entries to fill those in every at the end of every week. So what we will do is we'll create a flow, and that flow will look at a person's expected work hours. And the solution is not perfect. Those of you who know project operations, you're thinking, well, what about days off? I might not work 35, 7.5 hours every day. That's, by the way, the amount of hours that we work by our collective agreement in Finland, if you're interested in knowing. I think the Swedes work 40 hours. They work more than we do. But in any case, so one of those, again, decisions is, if we want to take these from our actual work hours in Dynamics, code's going to be needed because the calendar tables are really hard to get into. Actually, they're impossible to get into without code, I believe. And so it's and days off, public holidays. How do we factor those in? So again, might not be a perfect solution, but I feel it is most likely good enough, because on this platform there's really no perfect solution for this to be honest, that I have encountered. If you have the perfect solution for this, definitely let me know. So what we'll do is we'll look at our expected work hours per week, which would be 35.5, and then we'll sum the existing hours that we have. We'll sum that up, and if a person has not worked 37.5, or if they don't have time entries for 37.5, submitted time entries for 37.5 hours a week, then we'll send out a reminder to them. And what we'll also do is we'll look at the person's manager, and we'll send a weekly digest to a manager and all the to a manager with a table of all their subordinates and the hours of their subordinates in case they are, if in case they've not done that 37.5 a week. So that way, not only do I as a consultant get a reminder that, hey, I need to fill in my missing 6 hours, but my manager also gets an email that, hey, Antti's missing 30 hours this week. He hasn't done his time entries. Maybe you should reach out to him. Now, is something like this that pings, people on Teams, is this the optional way? You could use emails as well. I'm not a big fan of emails, to be honest. You could also do this in Power BI. So one option is that you don't ping people on Teams, but you create a time entry view, like an easy time entry report that people are able to go on and look for. There's sum totals from there, especially for managers. So Power BI works as well, and you could probably do Power BI alerts or something for these kinds of things as well. I'm not a Power BI person, so I can't guarantee what Power BI alerts would actually accomplish to their fullest extent, but something like that could be possible. So kind of looking at the actual solution, the time entry reminders, this is, let me hop over to my different view. This is pretty straightforward. Like I said, when I've not worked 37.5 hours, I'm going to get an adaptive card on Teams, and then my manager is going to get a table as well. So they're both here together because this is my card, and I'm a manager for these two people, so I get their time entries as well. And this is something that I didn't really realize before I did this to a similar thing to a customer. This table right here, Teams has a very specific limit on how big something like this can be. So if I try to send a table that has like 50 rows in it, it's going to go past that limit by Teams. So sending a table in Teams is not, actually that's not something that works. It doesn't scale. So that's I kind of learned that the hard way. So that was a scalability issue. So it should probably be an adaptive card or something else. That Power BI approach probably works a lot better for managers, because for an individual you can just send out an adaptive card. So the flow is is it does have a fair amount of steps and hoops and loops. It runs on an occurrence every Friday afternoon, and sets some dates, lists all our bookable resources, or all our resources that are consultants, and then basically sends that attachment on Teams. So now, if we think of the I'm trying to share my PowerPoint presentation back. I am conscious of time. I have 3 minutes. So if we think of the kind of pros and cons of this, one big thing here is you want to define, what should be sent when and to whom, and how often are you going to send whatever it is that you want to inform people of, and what is the delivery method for that? Is that going to be email, or is that going to be Teams? So you have to think of the entire organization. This can't just be a decision from IT that this is how we're going to do it. You kind of have to approach this from a internal communications point of view. And for those time entries, again, flow is not the best for complex calculations. You have to kind of keep it simple enough. And really, that adaptive card approach, I personally like that a lot. If you're able to create that and just send like a sum total and how much you've done and how much you're missing, a lot of times that's all you need to do. And just don't ping people unless you really need to. Unnecessary reminders are not good. So, in this example, you're getting a reminder in every single case. But if a person's done their hours, if they've done 37.5 out of 37.5, you don't want to send them a reminder for time entries. I think that's just stupid. I mean, you don't ping them and ask them to do and check something if there's no real reason to do that. So just really think of the use cases before you do this. And I think out of these 3 options, this is the most consultant friendly option, definitely, to build. And then just putting it all together, I know that we are almost out of time. But we are almost out of time. Power Automate can be a powerful enable for functional consultants, and it can also take more time than Pro Code if scope's too big. And I actually have to drop off. I'm getting my customer calling me frantically, so I do need to drop off right now. But I hope you had an awesome session and enjoyed chiming in. So thanks, everyone, and have a good one.
Thank you so much, Annie. I hope everyone had enjoyed this session. Indeed, it was a great learning for everyone. So since we are running out of time, so we have our next session speaker available, Zenobia Khan. Zenobia, are you ready?
Yeah, I am.